So there's this study out. This is going to blow your mind. I don't understand how people are not storming the CDC and the FDA and demanding people be thrown in jail. But look at this. There's this new paper out that talks about how certain doses, certain batches of the COVID-19 vaccine had crazy high numbers of adverse events from the vaccines. And some batches had almost none. So look at this. So you see this? These are the highest rate of adverse events from the vaccine. This is from the COVID-19 vaccine. So the higher you go over here, the more adverse events there are. So this blue line here, 1 in 20 adverse events. 1 in 20 vaccines got you an adverse event from these batches. And these batches are giant. These batches down here have less adverse events. See, that was and then this one here, the yellow. So these were the initial batches, and then these were later. Now, a lot of people are speculating that since these had such high adverse events, that they changed the formulation. But we don't have any evidence of that. That's some people speculating that because they're having too many. That's some people are speculating that they were having so many adverse events from the vax that they changed the formulation. Now, we don't have any evidence of that. I'm not saying that happened, but some people are speculating that happened. Now I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to give you some more information about this that is going to make you upset. If this doesn't make you upset yet, if you don't understand what I'm talking about yet, John Campbell is going to tell you what to be upset about. He's going to show you the data in a different way.
So here we have this graphic here. Now, this is the blue group here of very high adverse reactions up here. Now, this highest reaction here means that there was one suspected adverse reaction per 20 doses of the vaccine given. Now, this is just, well, put a word in here. Every 20 doses of the vaccine given, there was one suspected adverse reaction. Absolutely incredible. When we look at this, green group here, we did see an increase in adverse reactions with these batches. But here, the highest dose, most adverse reactions there in the green group was 1 in 1,000. And these are specific batches. I've got these directly from the authors. So batch EJ6134, given out early in 2021, for every 20 vaccine doses given, there was one suspected adverse event. Slightly later on, for vaccine dose EW6126, there was 1 in 1,000. Still too high. And then later on, this yellow group down the bottom has been associated with no adverse reactions. Now, perhaps the reason that this group on the bottom has been associated with 0 adverse reactions is the fact that the data's not all in yet. So as time goes on...
No, again, some people say that because they changed the formulation. Again, I'm just saying some people speculate that. There's no evidence to that. Probably not true. Probably not true.
This yellow line will lift slightly from the baseline. But that's what we're seeing here, incredibly high rates of adverse reactions early on in the pandemic. And that, as I say, most of these blue batches were pre-April 2021. Now, just to be completely clear, the authors had no conflict of interest other than certain papers that could be discussed where there's potential conflict of interest. The authors worked very, very hard on this on their own, and this is the data they got.
So the scientists, the doctors who put this together have no conflicts of interest. They don't have any funding or anything.
Let's get down to a bit of the detail now, because this really is incredible. I mean, if I'd known about this graph and these high rates of potential side effects, 1 in 20 vaccines given, come on. Is there any way I would have accepted that vaccine? Emphatically not. In fact, if I'd known I was on the green line somewhere with 1 in 1,000, I wouldn't have taken it either. There's just a huge issue here of informed consent. Now, these batches were given out all over the world, perhaps not in the United States. The United States tended to make their own batches. The Europeans and to an extent the Antipodeans shared their own batches as well. So this is perhaps a pan-European batch that was given here. So this is affecting everywhere, presumably. This vaccine was given outside of the United States. And there's no reason to assume it would be different in the United States. The only way I would have accepted the vaccine if we'd been on the yellow line. If we'd known that the rates of suspected adverse reactions were anything like as high, I would have not touched it with a barge pole. Why weren't we told? Where is the informed consent? It's outrageous. Anyway, let's stick to the data and not...
So here's a guy who's a doctor of nursing, and he is outraged. Where are my comedian friends? When are they ever going to get outraged about being lied to about COVID? When are they going to get outraged about the huge deception from start to finish? The answer is never. They're never. Because they all got duped, and they went along willfully, and they became authoritarian maniacs. The worst version of themselves they became. And they shamed people for asking obvious questions about this. And now we find out they were lying. And they're never going to get... This guy's upset. He's emotional. I thought that's just me. But comedians still, whatever. Let's talk about something else. Who wants to go see a comedian talk about something else? Here we go.
2 cross. As we've said, 71% of suspected adverse reactions occurred in 4.2 of participants with massive differences.
So did you see that? 71% of the adverse events came from 4.2% of the batches. So certain batches were giving people high amounts of adverse events. Why isn't this studied? What is this about? Why aren't they talking? Why is that? Was it something about maybe they weren't preserved correctly? Maybe something happened. Maybe there was maybe they got contaminated. What was it? But they don't even tell you about this, and they've known about this. You have to have an independent researcher go find it by their own dime.
It's clear to you that each of these dots is a batch. So these are vaccine batches. Massive difference in reported adverse reactions between the different batches of vaccine. And this is hard, firm, mathematical, statistically significant data. Now, no conflicts of interest. That's the graph as we've said there. And we can see clearly we have the blue group, the green group, and the yellow group. Now, the blue group vaccines were mostly given early. The green ones and the yellow ones were mostly given later. And not entirely. That's not how these are classified, but these are the clusters that the analysis of the batches fell into. And again, all based on...
And so now a lot of people try to discredit this by saying, oh, well, the early batches went to elderly people. That's why there was more adverse events. Still, if it was 1 in 20, that's crazy. But that's not true also. They went to young people. A lot of them went to young people who were frontline workers in hospitals. So that's not true.
Specific batches. If you talk to the authors, they'll give you the batch number for each one of these dots. It's a very nicely conducted piece of science. So number of suspected adverse events, as we say, varies massively between the vaccine batches. And this is all after the Pfizer vaccine in Denmark. Why would they vary so massively like that? Some batches give almost no adverse events. Some give 1 in 20. What is going on? And why aren't anybody looking into it? Why has it been left for a few Danish academics to do this? Why did the British regulatory authorities do this, or the German regulatory authorities, or the Danish regulatory authorities, or the American or the Canadian regulatory authorities? Why is this left to independent academics? Unfunded independent academics.
Because they don't want to know this.
Vital, absolutely vital insight.
Because all those people are captured by big pharma cash. All those agencies are captured. And they don't want to know this data. They don't want to know anything bad about that would hurt big pharma's bottom line because our government is completely corrupted.
27th of December 2020 to the 11th of January 2022, based on a population of 5.8 million, and according to the number of doses per vaccine batch. Now, what we do see is that there's a positive correlation between number of vaccines in the batch and the increased rate of side effects. But the author today, I did talk to Dr. Vibeke Maneke today, lead author, and she said they can't put too much weight on this at the moment. But there is definitely a trend that the larger the number of vaccine vials in the batch, the more adverse reactions there is.
Why?
There's a positive correlation there. We can't say more than that at the moment, though. But the authors are still working on this. Now, by November the 11th, 2020...
So some batches had, say, 180,000 vaccines in it. And some batches just had like 2,000 vaccines in it. And he's saying there's a correlation between the higher number of vaccines in a batch and the higher rate of adverse events. That's what he's saying. Why is that?
In the European area, 701 million doses of Pfizer vaccine given, 971,000 23,021 reported suspected adverse events. Clinical data on individual vaccine batch levels have not been reported anywhere else. This is the first time this has been done. Why? The whole point of having a batch number is so this can be done.
That's right.
The whole point of, I've been writing batch numbers down for the last 40 years after giving medications and vaccines and different things. And the whole point is if there's an adverse event, we can go back and look at the batch. Why did the regulatory authorities let us down, completely fail, you and me, on this ongoing post-marketing surveillance that we were promised?
Because of money.
It hasn't happened, according to the batch, apart from a few independent, hard-working Danish academics, bless them, who've done a fantastic job. Batch-dependent variability in the clinical efficacy and safety of vaccines would appear to be highly unlikely, is what we were told, until you actually look at the data, and then you find out, well, hey, actually, no, there is actually massive variation, strangely enough. Right, so the authors say, we therefore examine rates of suspected adverse reactions between different vaccine doses in Denmark. All this data on suspected adverse reactions from the Danish Medical Agency. And of course, you and me both know that by no means all of the adverse reactions that actually occur are reported.
That's right.
So I think we can say these are minimum levels of.
So he's saying these are minimal levels of adverse events because they don't all get reported. Okay.
Adverse reactions without too much fear of contradiction. Suspected adverse reactions, seriousness. So suspected adverse reactions, seriousness was classified as non-serious or serious. And that the serious included hospitalizations or prolonged or existing or prolongation of existing hospitalization, life-threatening illnesses, permanent disability or congenital malformation or another potential.
So they classified the serious adverse events as serious and non-serious. What is a serious one? Well, serious is if you had to be hospitalized or prolongation of an existing hospitalization or a life-threatening illness, permanent disability, congenital malformation, and then this last one. What is this?
Effect.
Suspected adverse event related to, he starts it with a D, but I don't know what those other things are.
The potential serious adverse reaction. The data was fully anonymized, so this is a completely ethical study. Suspected adverse events were counted on a batch level by linking individual suspected adverse events to the batch labels, the batch numbers. Okay. They were able to get this data from the Danish authorities, albeit after some difficulty, it has to be said.
So they didn't want to release the information.
If you watch the video, I'm going to give later on the next video.
They had to fight to get this info, by the way.
The data was actually based, that's this data here, that the authors have, was actually based on 10.7 million doses administered vaccine, just over 4 million individual people, 52 different Pfizer vaccine doses. So it's huge sample sizes. And the batches contained 2,340 to 841.
So some batches had 2,340 vials. Some batches had 814,000. What? Why such a big batch? Why such a low batch? And why is there a correlation between a higher batch and the adverse events?
1,000 doses per batch. And as we say, there's a trend for the ones with higher numbers in the batch to have more adverse reactions. The authors say we can't put too much significance on that till they've done further work. Although the positive correlation is obvious to the human eye, of course, as you can see without me pointing out. 43,496 suspected adverse reactions were registered in 13,635 people. So these are big sample numbers. 61,000 overall were able to be identified to the batches. Unfortunately, 23.5% of the adverse reactions, 14,509, were described as severe. And 579, 0.9% of those reported were more severe.
So almost 1% of the adverse events ended were with that word I can't show you. Isn't that wild?
Yes.
Almost 1% of the adverse events. Because 23% of the adverse events are considered severe, and of those, 0.9%, almost 1%. Okay.
Adverse reaction. resulting in an irreversible adverse reaction. Unexpectedly, the rates per 1,000 dose vary considerably between vaccine batches. You can say that again, from 1 or essentially 0 on the yellow line. But as we say, with this yellow line, there probably will be some that do emerge at a later date. There is a bit of a lag in the reporting in the Danish system. So basically, from 1 per 20 doses to 1 in many thousands of doses to 0. Now, other variables here: vaccine manufacturing, vaccine storage, vaccine transportation, clinical handling control, administration techniques, of course, could all bear some influence on these data. But there we have it. It is quite incontrovertible by this data. Massive changes, massive rates in the reported suspected adverse reactions, including serious adverse reactions, depending on the vaccine batch. I hesitate to be flippant, but I just hope you were given one of the, if you were vaccinated, that you were given one of the batches that were nearer this end of the graph than the top end of the graph. There was no significant variation between the ages of people in either group, because early on, there was a lot of young people given the vaccine in the start of 2021 in Denmark. In other words, the blue vaccine doses, for one simple reason: they were healthcare workers. So a lot of young healthcare workers were vaccinated, as well as the elderly and the frailer people. And the differences in the difference in different age groups between the different blue, green, and yellow clusters is not significant. So there we have that. Now, I have actually interviewed one of the researchers. I'm not going to play it all, but this is.
Okay, so I just want to close with this. This is how he closed.
Got quite emotional after that. Combination of
he said I'm emotional after that.
Got quite emotional after that. Combination of severe annoyance, well, not annoyance, total outrage that this data was not made public. It's very high rates of adverse reactions were not made public. So I couldn't give my informed consent. As you couldn't either.
So if you didn't know that data, how could you make an informed consent to that treatment? You can't. You didn't have the data. You didn't know. Informed consent, I think, comes from the Nuremberg trials.
But known that, wouldn't have touched it with a barge pole. Let down, to put it mildly. Thank you for watching.
And where are my comedian friends? They're all too cowardly to do even one video about it. They won't do anything that questions the COVID narrative. What did you become a comedian for? Just because you're a narcissist or you need attention? You give no care about... Oh, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. I have never been so disappointed by people in my life. And, from Chomsky to some of my favorite comedians. Some of my favorite comedians. And none of them will come out and say a goddamn thing about how wrong they were, how wrong it was to shame people for questioning this and having healthy skepticism, and how wrong it was to demonize people who did that and take the bait from corporate media to divide the country and blame your neighbor for COVID. They did that. Rich people did that over and over. And that should, if this doesn't outrage you, I guess nothing will. And you're just worthless. Hey, the vaccine is safe and effective, and it will keep you from getting seriously ill or hospitalized or death. And it does slow the spread and contraction of the virus. It's fantastic. I love the COVID-19 vax. Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Baltimore, San Francisco, Huntington Beach, Rosemont, and Chicago, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, and more, and St. Louis. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all our tickets for all our shows.